Okay, so our first speaker, Phil Armstrong, is the project director for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission, planning activities and events intended to tell the full story of Tulsa's historic Greenwood district, from its origins in the early 1900s to the present day. Phil is a leadership Tulsa graduate and an active community member who enjoys singing for events and organizations around Tulsa. Phil, you're up. Thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Erica.
Phil, yes, I will give you a screen sharing.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Erica, for inviting me. And I always enjoy the opportunity to share this rich history. And we are in the throes of, I would say, for 2021 is going to be a remarkable year for many reasons, and one of which, of course, has to do with the commemoration of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, but more so a coming together of this community, the city, the state, the nation, really, and many of the eyes of the world are literally, and I do not overstate that, literally, people from around the world are tuned into Tulsa and wanting to know how they can be a part, how they can support, and want in some kind of way, if they can't be here physically, really want to be a part of the 2021. And it's going to be a whole year. This is one thing that the commission, I'm the project director for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. And one of the things that's been in the forefront and continues to guide us in these decisions and the things that we plan with the community and different participants and organizations is that we do not want May 31st, 2021 to be just a kumbaya moment where we come together and reflect and then everyone goes back to their respective corners. 2021 is going to be a launching year, a launching pad for just continual focus and change from 2021 on the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I think the city of Tulsa and this nation will mark 2021 as a year when things really begin to move in an entirely different direction as it relates to racial trauma, racial healing, and race relations in general overall. So without any further ado, I do have some slides that I'm going to present and show and try to tell the story. Some of this will be historical perspective, and then some of it will be just showing some of the work that the commission and our capital campaign and our programs and some of the things that we're doing for this history. So I'm going to share my screen, and the first thing that you'll see on your screens is the name of the new world-class history center, world-class museum grade facility called Greenwood Rising. And this will be the history center for Black Wall Street and all of this rich history. It is going to be built and ready for 2021 for the centennial. And we are looking forward to the opportunity for people to be able to see this. So the first thing, what I do is like to start out, and I'll stop sharing for just a moment, just to kind of set this video up. For those of you who were HBO subscribers or know anything about the work of HBO, on October the 19th or October the 20th, 2019, on a Sunday evening, HBO Watchmen debuted episode 1, season 1. And the first 3 minutes and 39 seconds was a depiction, a video depiction of what it must have been like in the hours of the actual massacre. Many people were not expecting what they saw. If you think or know of anything about DC and Marvel comics, they were anticipating a visual interpretation of that comic, well-known comic, but Damon Lindelof, who's become a close friend of the commission and communicates with me and his group, his executive staff. He is the creator and executive producer of the Lost series, and he created the HBO Watchmen. And so I want to show that because it's so powerfully gripping. And I try to set it up by saying, imagine people all over the world tuning in to Watchmen with anticipation, and the first thing they saw was this video presentation. I will share my screen and show that to you now. So let's stop there for a moment and talk about that in perspective to the presentation. So that debuted again Sunday, October 20th, 2019. And for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I was on phone call after phone call after phone call from news agencies from literally around the country and around the world. And they all asked the two same questions. Number one, was that real? You know, how much of that was just Hollywood video production? I mean, come on, really? Planes flying over and really, was it really like that, and how much of it was real? So the first thing we had to do is educate. That's the first thing, and to provide them and then let them know that the Tulsa Historical Society and the Oklahoma Historical Society have all the eyewitness accounts, the pictures, the photographs that detailed everything that you saw, anywhere from the planes flying over to incendiary devices being dropped to the onslaught of 18 hours of mass destruction that took place. The one thing I do have to credit HBO and Damon Lindelof is that in 2018, they actually brought their team here. Tim Blake Nelson, that was one of the actors in there, is a Tulsa native, so he was able to bring his crew here. And thankfully for them, they didn't say, hey, HBO's in town, we're gonna do this. No one knew they were here. They actually went through the historic district. They went through the Greenwood Culture Center. They sat in on one of our presentations from the commission. So they got their information so that they can present the most real depiction of actually what must have been like in those 18 hours. And they hit the nail on the head, if you pardon the phrase. In the beginning, it's a throwback. The black and white film is a throwback to Bass Reeves. Again, they really wanted to educate people. Bass Reeves, in the 1800s, mid-1800s, was the first African-American U.S. deputy marshal that served west of the Mississippi. He patrolled the areas of Arkansas and Oklahoma, and he is one of the most famous and most successful U.S. deputy marshals that ever lived. He brought over 3,000 fugitives to justice, only killed 16 people in the line of defense. He was fluent in Creek, in Seminole, and Cherokee, and that's what made him so successful in the territory where Native Americans and African Americans and whites flourished. He's buried in Muskogee of Oklahoma, of all places, back in 1913. But the character of the Lone Ranger is based upon the real life of African-American Bass Reeves, the black mask that surrounds his face. So a lot of things is like, wow, history, when you look up history and find out the character Lone Ranger said to have been based upon his real life character. And so the theater that the young boy is sitting and watching the film is the famous Lula Williams Dreamland Theater, the Williams Theater, that was destroyed in 1921. The black man that came in to get his son and his wife, a black soldier, represents some of the black men who had served in the war and some of those that had marched downtown to try to defend and keep Dick Rowland, the African-American young man, from being lynched, which led to the altercations and led to the massacre. We'll get into some of that later, but I always like to show that visual presentation to give you a mindset of what type of history that we are commemorating when we talk about the anniversary of this event. So let's get into what we really want to discuss, and that is Tulsa's historic Greenwood District. It reflects the power of the human spirit generally, the vision, determination, resilience of its oppressed and marginalized Black citizens specifically. That human spirit can be found within the book Black Wall Street by Hannibal Johnson. He's a member of the Centennial Commission, local historian, author, and expert on all of this information. He's been studying this for about 30 years. He's about to release his latest book this year, I think in the fall of this year. But this book, there's a passage of a correspondence of letters between two men, and I like to share this because it reflects the true spirit between Curtis, a man in Detroit, and Oliver, his friend in Tulsa, immediately after the race riot. I will read, and you can follow along with me. Dear Oliver, I am, by our local newspaper, fully advised of the whole terrible tragedy there. Now that they have destroyed your homes, wrecked your schools, churches, and business places, and killed your people, I am sure that the Negroes will rapidly give up the town and move north. Enclosed, please find a draft for $40 to purchase your ticket to Detroit. We'll be expecting you, Curtis. And the response from Oliver, Dear Curtis, how kind of you to volunteer your sympathetic assistance. It is just like you to be helpful to others in times of stress like this. True it is, we are facing a terrible situation. It is equally true that they have destroyed our homes, they have wrecked our schools, they have reduced our churches to ashes, and they have murdered our people, Curtis. but they have not touched our spirit. And while I speak only for myself, let it be said that I came here and built my fortune with that spirit. I shall reconstruct it here with that spirit, and I expect to live on and die here with it. Oliver. And with that spirit, we introduce Greenwood Rising, an 11,000 square foot facility that will reflect this history, not just of the massacre, but the entirety of the history of Greenwood and the history of this African-American enclave of entrepreneurialism that was known as Greenwood. We'll talk about how Black people got in Oklahoma in the first place. We'll talk about the 5 civilized tribes and how they brought their African slaves with them during the Indian Removal Act of the 1830s. We'll talk about land allotments and how when they freed their African slaves, we talk about Juneteenth, that became widely known on the radar in the last few weeks. June the 19th, 1865, when slaves in Texas and Oklahoma found out they were actually emancipated. Well, it wasn't until June the 14th, 1866, an entire year later, when the Creek Nation released their African slaves, and they gave them their fair share of land allotments, anywhere from 40 acres to 200 acres per person. And so that's where the historic all Black towns of Oklahoma became created, because African Americans who had direct bloodline lineage with the Native American tribes received land allotments, and they became immediate landowners. When you owned land, you had wealth. And then you move on to the 1900s, early 1900s, when the discovery of oil and gas and oil companies writing those royalty checks to get to that oil on your land, and African Americans became millionaires, those who did own land and vast land parts of it. And so it's not that Greenwood was the only African American enclave that had prosperity. It's just that no other place had this large collection of land ownership with the combination of oil and gas riches and royalties that made this particular place so wealthy and so full of so much wealth by African Americans in one geographical area. So Greenwood Rising, you see on the screen, will be built at the corner of Greenwood and Archer, which is historically the gateway to Black Wall Street. That term was coined by Booker T. Washington when he visited this area in 1905, and he first dubbed it Negro Wall Street. And that, of course, turned in the 1960s and 70s, was changed to Black Wall Street. A few more renderings here just to give you a visual. And real quickly on my time check, Erica, please interrupt me once I get over time, because I know I only have a few minutes left. So please, I can talk about this for days. So please jump in and say, wrap it up. We're down to the last 2 minutes. So please let me know on my time.
You're good. You have
plenty of time.
Okay. Here's a few more renderings of the interior of the building. And let's go through a couple with exhibits. We'll capture a little bit of history and then a showcasing of this project. So we're going to talk again, the full expansive part of the history. You can see on the back walls there, the Trail of Tears and Freedmen will tell that story. We'll talk about Black boosterism and all Black towns. There was over 50 all Black towns, prospering towns in Oklahoma. In fact, in 1833, Oklahoma was once going to be determined to see if it should be an all Black state. It was almost seeking affirmation from the US government to be an all Black state. And those Black towns all had Black newspapers, and they started what was called Black boosterism. They actually would send newspaper pamphlets all over the country, especially in the South, and in summary say, hey, if you want to escape the harsh realities of post-life after slavery, come to Oklahoma. Black people, we own land, we have towns, we have businesses, we're prospering, we are doing well, we can actually live free. And so a lot of African Americans moved to Oklahoma because of this Black boosterism that took place. We'll of course talk about some of the pioneers. That is O.W. Gurley you see on your screen. He is considered the father of Black Wall Street, and there will be others that will be displayed. As we go on, One of the things that we're really excited about is a new feature. We will have here the first ever that we are aware of. We are designing this museum with New York-based firm Local Projects. They designed the 9/11 Museum. They also designed in Montgomery, worked with Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. They designed the Legacy Museum, the history of African Americans from slavery to mass incarceration. So we took a visit there to Montgomery and just was enamored by the detail of the Narrative Museum, the Legacy Museum there in Montgomery, and we got their contact, and they have been totally a joy to work with. But they, through input from the community and from the commission, are going to we'll have the first ever, if you know anything about Black history and Black culture, historically, African Americans get their information from two places, the church and the barber shop, or the barber or beauty salons. And so we will have the first ever hologram barbershop history experience. So you'll be able to hear the history of Greenwood and have the banter that you normally hear in an African-American atmosphere of a barbershop, talking about the history of Greenwood. Not only that, but the technology will be interactive, so that if a young person sits in the chair, the hologram will actually start to act as if it's cutting their hair and talking to that person. Here we have an example of the hologram saying to this young boy, never forget where you come from and who you are. So we're really excited about this technology, in that Greenwood Rising in Tulsa will be the only place that will have this type of experience. We'll have a timeline that will talk about the arc of oppression from the landing of the first slaves in Virginia from 1619 all the way to present day, and we'll talk about different points of time. We'll talk about the hours leading up to the massacre, what actually sparked the massacre, the elevator incident between Dick Rowland and Sarah Page in the Drexler building on May 30th, and then May 31st when he was arrested, brought to the courthouse, and a mob forms to try to lynch him, and the time period from the first shots that were fired at 10:30 p.m. and all the destruction that ensued for the next 18 hours. 33 to 35 city blocks. I say that again, 33 to 35 city blocks that were destroyed in about 18 hours. We'll talk about the aftermath and the rebuilding. We'll talk about the heyday that this spirit that Greenwood was seen more so in how these people rebuilt their community. And you have to keep in mind, without any financial remuneration from the state, from the city, and the inability for them to file and receive their insurance claims, that speaks to the wealth that was generated in these Black communities and in Greenwood, that they were able to rebuild Greenwood and actually make it bigger and better than it was prior to 1921. This is where a lot of educational aspects come out, because many people, even people who live here in Tulsa, did not realize that everyone thinks that time stood still after 1921. 80 to 90% of Greenwood was actually rebuilt within 5 years. The peak of all the economic activity, over 200 Black-owned businesses, over 1,200 Black-owned homes, over 7 grocery stores, 3 hospitals, and the list goes on, was actually in the 1940s, the 1940s. So Greenwood was rebuilt with that resilient spirit, bigger and better than it was prior to its destruction. All of this history leads into a place that we're calling the reconciliation, journey to reconciliation. We'll actually have, after you've gone through this narrative experience, an amphitheater style space where people can sit and talk and dialogue and have discussions about these difficult racial topics, to have programming so we can experience how we as a people, Black and white, red and brown, young and old, rich and poor, can deal with this race problem that we still have in America. You can see on the wall there some of the 3 points that will be covered in this area. Number 1, recognize that racism in America is both systemic and institutionalized, with far-reaching effects on both political engagement and economic opportunities for minorities. Number 2, empower local communities through relationship building and truth-telling. And number 3, include all stakeholders to employ restorative justice. So we're really excited about the opportunity for people to be able to have this space and programming that allows for us to have these difficult discussions and begin our way to racial healing and a coming together for us to have a better future, a brighter future together. So this is kind of a recap of the museum. This is a 30,000-foot level view, I will call it that. There will be so many more things that I'm not showing here, just giving you the highlights of this 11,000 square foot expansive museum. The other project that we'll be doing will be building a pathway to hope. As you can see on this screen, this satellite view, you can see where Greenwood Rising will be built on Greenwood and Archer. And you'll be able to take a short walk and get to the pathway to hope. This will be a historical walking path that will have artwork, it will have beautiful landscape, but it's meant to be a symbolism of rejoining this district that was destroyed, or that had one of the things that destroyed the vibrancy of Greenwood back in the 60s and 70s was the building of the I-244 program, urban renewal, or what many refer to as urban removal, because of the eminent domain and all the Black-owned businesses and homes that were destroyed by the building of this highway. And so this is seen as a symbolism of rejoining the district. And you'll be able to walk this across and enter into the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park and enjoy all of the artifacts, historical artifacts, from Greenwood Cultural Center to the Vernon AME Church to the forthcoming Tiffany Crutcher's Tulsa Remembrance Project that will be here just to the south of Vernon AME. All of these wonderful cultural historical places within walking distance. And so we're really looking forward to that. If you want more information, if you want to just, how can I be a part? How can I donate to the capital campaign? Whether you're donating $5, $100, or $1 million, we're going to have a donor wall that will show this was a community effort. Everyone who gave $1 is going to be displayed and their name displayed on the wall. So you can go to Tulsa, go to our website, I'm sorry, we had a little blank there, www.tulsa2021.org, and you will be able to get all of our information, tulsa2021.org. You'll be able to sign up for our newsletter. You'll be able to get our regular information that we put out. You'll be able to see a community calendar, all the events and commemorative activities that will be taking place over the next course of the year. And then, of course, the substantial commemorative events that will take place in the weekend before, all the way through, and the weekend after the centennial. And as you can see there, this is our website landing page shows a tribute to Representative John Lewis and his passing. So Tulsa2021.org is where you can go get all your information that you want to find out. And I want to make sure I respect the time. And if there's any comments, any questions, or if we're allowed for that, anybody have any input? We also have several committees. We have an economic development committee for the plans for spurring of economic development activity here in Greenwood over the next course of the year, the next 3 to 5 years, working with many organizations, including the city of Tulsa. We have our education committee. We have hosted for the last 3 years a Teachers Institute, a webinar this year, but the prior 2 years, a Teachers Institute, where we actually have Oklahoma public school teachers come here, spend a week. They learn the history. They learn how to teach the history. They use the curriculum that has been developed by Dr. Carlos Hill, who is OU professor, chair of the African Americans department there. He runs that seminar, and they get certified to actually go back and teach other teachers. This year was the first year that we're able to get Dr. Hoffmeister, the superintendent of Oklahoma Public Schools, and Dr. Deborah Gist, superintendent of the largest public school district, TPS, where they actually came together, and we had a press release where they were, with intentionality, dedicating resources this year for the intentional teaching of this history in classes. Our ultimate goal with the education committee is that we actually will have testing standards so that this can be a part of the required Oklahoma historical credit teaching. So there's many more things I can talk about, of course, but again, I wanted to give you a good idea of what we're planning, what we're working on, Greenwood Rising, and then the history in and of itself. So I'll open it up to wherever we want to go from here, Erica.
Thank you, Phil. That was very informative, very informative. Like, that was, the tour of it was just amazing. Like, I can't wait for that to get here. It kind of reminded me of the cultural center in Watchmen, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought that's really, really cool.
Well, that was really one of the funny things is, again, we didn't know that they had put this together based on the history that was presented. So I think it was episode 3, there was actually a museum that they had created, a futuristic museum. And at that point, we started saying, okay, wait a minute, this is just too similar to what we're doing here. They had to have been here. And so we started making contact with them. And so we actually dialogue regularly with them, and Damon Lindelof, he's made a significant contribution to our work, and really, they really were sincere in making sure they presented actual true information.
Right. When I watched it, I said, that would be cool if we had something like that here. And that's why I was like, oh, okay. So what's happening?
Let me give you the influence of that show. So they had one portion, so there was some Hollywood things. They actually had one episode where people could give their DNA, and this machine would give you who your ancestors were, so you can track if your ancestor died and was massacred during the killed during the massacre. There were people actually calling the city of Tulsa, wanting to know where they can send their DNA so they can be contributed to that machine. They had to tell them that was HBO, okay? That was HBO. We really don't have anything like that. But that was the impact and influence of that show.
Wow, that would be cool. Erica asked, she thanks you. How long have the plans been going on, and when did it start for the Centennial?
So the commission began in 2015. This is the actual second commission. The first commission on reparations and the destruction and the evaluation of what was destroyed took place in 1997, and that report was submitted in 2001. So this is the second commission headed by State Senator Kevin Matthews. He's the founder and chair. 2015 is when all this began. And about 2017, 2018 is when we started having the community meetings. The local projects team came down, and they've spent 2 or 3 different trips here, meeting with different individuals, groups, community leaders, North Tulsa, South Tulsa, to try to get a full understanding of what people would like to see if we were to build a museum. And so that's how long this has been going on.
If anyone else has any questions for Phil, you can add them in this, the group chat over here. The website for the donations, Phil, if you could please put those in the group chat.
Got it. We'll do that.
So are you able to share those slides with the group?
Yes, we have presentation slides, and I can email them to you and Erica, and that way you can send them out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whitney Taylor says this is amazing. It absolutely is. I agree with her. If there's not any other questions, you can continue to put questions in a group chat. And also there is a reaction button at the bottom. Not too many reactions, but to show the speakers some appreciation. Because in this platform, it's kind of difficult just talking to people in this, just on this platform. So if you like what you're hearing, give a thumbs up, give a hand clap, and just show the speakers that you really appreciate what they're providing for us. So thank you, Phil. I'm not seeing any more questions over here. You gave an awesome presentation, and I really appreciate your time. Will virtual tours be available?
Funny you should say that. Thanks for that. It's an excellent question. We actually received a grant from Cox Communication. They granted us $50,000, and we're looking for more. We're actually going to have an app developed that will actually institute augmented reality, so that you not only can see the virtual visit of the museum, but as you walk around, if you visit here, and as you walk, for example, on the Pathway to Hope, and you're in front of one of the historical artworks or one of the pieces about O.W. Gurley, you actually will hold up your app phone, and it will pop up, maybe what that area looked like, maybe the building that was standing there at that time, the business that was there, the history on it. So yes, full expand. Because of COVID, we're already planning it, but COVID just made it even more of a reality that people will be able to visit this place virtually.
All right, I think that's it. Phil, I appreciate your energy you put into this. I can tell that you're very passionate about it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me.
For sure. Thank you for your patience, and you know, what happened last week. So I'm glad you're here. Glad you